The events industry is turning to virtual events to face the crisis generated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the massive cancellation of physical events. EventsCase wanted to support the industry by doing what it does best, putting technology at the forefront. You can now run virtual or hybrid events in minutes. There are no delays and no technical complications as we offer top-notch customer support along the way. With the new Smart TV interface in EventsCase's agenda module for both the web and the event app, event participants can access different virtual sessions with ease. As the event organizer, you simply need to add the link of your favorite streaming or video conference supplier within each session. Adding a link enables a play button for each session. Interaction amongst online attendees is also possible since the EventsCase platform supports Q&A, chat, and surveys in real time. Albeit from a distance, networking is still fully supported within EventsCase through the new video link function in our one-to-one meeting scheduler, as well as through private messages, news feeds, and forums. EventsCase is an easy-to-use, global, modular, multi-language, and secure event management software. Discover all of our products at www.eventscase.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Event Tech Talk Show. I'm Adam Parry, your host today and editor of Event Industry News. Before we get started, as you may have already seen, the registration for Event Tech Live US and Canada is now open, happening on the 8th and 9th of June. And you can actually go and register either by visiting eventtechlive.com or actually scanning that handy QR code up in the top hand corner. That should take you direct to the registration page. If you are an event organizer, agency, planner, or looking at event technology, then you can register under our hosted buyer VIP ticket for 100% free. And also, while we're on the subject of events, the entries for the Event Technology Awards are also open now, and you can see a full list of categories over at eventtechnologyawards.co.uk. If you missed the last episode, which was episode 5, we discussed events on the blockchain and how that might affect the events industry. So if you're interested in blockchain, crypto technologies, NFTs, these are big things in the news at the moment. You're probably seeing headlines come out left, right, and center about crypto and NFTs. Go and check that out. It's available on eventtechlive.com under our podcast and news section, or head over to Apple Podcasts or YouTube, and it's all there. And you can actually quickly get to it by going to eventtechtalks.com. So, on today's podcast, my guest is Katie Moorhen, the director of 5283. And for those that don't know, they are a specialist communications agency for events and the live entertainment industries. Before we get into it, please feel free to interact with me and Katie, ask us questions, comment. We'll bring those on screen and get you guys involved. So Katie, welcome to an episode of the Event Tech Talk Show.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's not a problem. You've had quite the career in the events industry. So before we get into today's subject, could you just give everybody a brief background about where you started in events and what your career in the events industry looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I started about 16 years ago as in Reed Exhibitions was my first event, and I actually worked on the customer service team. So picking up phones, I was just thinking about it the other day, it was at that transition when people were going from paper manuals to exhibitor manuals. Okay. So our job was to answer calls and queries from visitors and exhibitors. And this is for like World Travel Market, the own DSCI at the same time. So it was lots of irate exhibitors, which I think was really interesting because it was a sort of a transformation at that time to more digital and event tech. But from there, I then went on to the marketing teams at Reed, and I worked on IBTM, London Book Fair, some of the bigger trade shows. I then moved to Easy Fairs and became event director. I then left Easy Fairs to start my own marketing agency, originally for event organizers, and we still support event organizers, but we also support event technology companies and suppliers and helping them getting seen by organizers. So everything we do is events, and in the last 2 years we've really been supporting suppliers who also support the live industries. So I'm sure we'll talk about the definitions and what that means. We're seeing a lot broader definitions of what event means and what live means. So we've sort of pivoted our business, for want of a better word, to support those suppliers as well.
So you were right there, right when technology was kind of coming in and trying to take away those faxes and those papers for those exhibitor manuals, right, and digitize it all, right? Does the last year or so feel like that point in your life, at that point in your career?
I didn't think about it at the time, but I think I was recently writing something for an article for something, and I just thought, yeah, God, I've been through this before. I think I think that's my passion is event organisers kind of get in my way. I'm really interested about their customers. So sometimes, I've been guilty of it when I'm running marketing campaigns or sales campaigns. It's that legacy. It's that, well, we've always done it this way, whereas actually, I'm really passionate about why people exhibit. And we do a lot of work on the ground as well, trying to get local businesses and small businesses to go to events and to see events as a valid marketing platform. So yeah, I'm quite passionate about it.
Awesome. Well, today we're here to talk about a recent LinkedIn report. I guess the kind of report that maybe some of your customers or the people that you work with would put out. And that's why we've got you on to kind of dissect it as that PR guru of kind of like, and I think the experience that you have got in organizing, running and delivering events as well. So this article that LinkedIn put out, and I'm just going to bring it onto stream now, was that 45% of future B2B events will be completely virtual, according to the research that they've done, which I think is really interesting. I'm just going to remove that for a second. That's quite a polarizing kind of statement to suggest that half of our industry in the future won't have a physical element. What was your thoughts and feelings when you saw that headline?
I think my initial, I feel like that throws up more questions than it does answers. It made me think of this whole definition of what an event is. What is a B2B event? If I'd said to you, we've known each other for quite a few years, and if I'd said to you in 2018, oh, I'm running an event, and then I put on a Zoom webinar series, you'd laugh. You'd absolutely laugh at me in the pub and probably make some snarky remark. But actually, in the last 12 months, we have now embraced the changing definition of events. And I think that's a really positive thing. I think it's going to lead to changes and it's pushing us forward as an events industry in its entirety. I think that's only a positive thing. But from looking at the report, I questioned about what they meant about virtual events, because I don't know about you, but I've attended lots of different virtual events over the last 12 months. I feel like I've been constantly in a virtual event, and the virtual offering is different for every type of event. I never know what I'm going to expect.
I think that's such a good point. And let's be honest, if we actually looked at it, I guess a virtual event in the guise of webinars, they've been around for decades now, right? I mean, it was a long, long time ago, the first ever webinar by, I think it was Citrix or Cisco or something that kind of pushed that technology out there. And over time, they were actually the things that people tried to avoid, right? Because they just felt like they were going to be hardcore sales pitches by corporate companies that use them to kind of support the sales team and support the marketing. So we kind of, I think everybody, as much as they can, switched off from webinars, really. I didn't see webinars being really hugely used by people. But then virtual events came in, and I think what we saw actually was a lot of virtual events that were just rebranded webinars to start off with. Then as an industry, we've kind of tried to grasp them and utilize that technology as professional organizers to maintain, I guess, income, revenue, and the support of our kind of niches that we work in our events ecosystem. But you are right. It's like, what is it? What's the definition of a virtual event now? Because there's no clear parameters, is there, on format, length, content, engagement, the makeup, the design of it. It's just, I guess it's this, isn't it? Is this a virtual event? We've got 4 attendees at the moment. It is lunchtime, to be fair, on Thursday. Everybody's probably in the pub. Is this a virtual event now? Like, do you have any kind of thoughts on how we might, as an industry, define what a virtual event is? Because now we're talking about hybrid already, and it's like, well, what's that?
Yeah, I don't think we need to. I don't think there's a need to. I think it's really good because there are some. So I'm obsessed with people that don't go to events. Do you know? There's people out there who don't go to events, who hate them. I don't know. I've met
Don't
them.
believe you. I don't believe you. We don't like those people, Kate.
But I find them really fascinating, because if we could convert some of those into people who love events, but maybe, there's people that have interacted with event brands who have never been able to interact with event brands before. And that's for so many different reasons. We always talk about, in the trade show world, we talk about conversion. So, standard trade show would convert, I'm going to be kind and say 50% of their registrations. So we always are obsessed with why did that 50% not come to the trade show? Now, before it's been time, pressures, etc., etc. But what if you could convert them in at least 20% more into interacting with your brand online? Your event brand all of a sudden becomes bigger, and your conversation is bigger, and you've got access to more data, and you've got access to more reach. I think it's Bill Gates who says it's a fool that thinks in the next couple of years. You've got to think in the next 10 years. There are real problems facing our planet, sustainability, and accessibility as well. Think of those people who can't physically get to your event. They still want to interact with your brand. So how do you service those guys? And I think the great thing about the last year is it's made people, you should be doing hybrid, not because a hybrid event is the thing to do. You should be doing hybrid, and you should be looking at what you're serving your customers. And it's a great time to drop the legacy. If a trade show isn't serving your customer and your audience anymore, or a corporate conference isn't serving your customers anymore, what can you do now? What do they actually want to do? And now is the time to change it. So I think it's a really exciting time, because a lot of people can go, we're not going to spend money on doing that. We're going to spend money on doing that instead. And your customers are so much more adaptable at this time. This is like a pivotal moment for a lot of event brands, I think.
Yeah, I'm interested. I think one of the first things I looked at this, and I was like, it says B2B events. So I think initially your thoughts would be that this is what I would class as the professional event organizing community, your trade shows, your for-profit event organizers, right? That's what that headline suggested to me. But once you actually, I think, start to dissect the content, it's not actually talking about that. To some degree, yes, I guess every event organizer, every professional event organizer out there is going to probably launch some form of virtual events to kind of capitalize on that revenue as well, or that desire for somebody to just sponsor that or exhibit at that. But it's not suggesting that 45% of those previously physical events will now transition to being fully virtual. It's more akin to talking about probably actually the corporate world, me and you as businesses now utilizing that technology in order to reach our community and our customers on our own terms, maybe as an alternative choice to going to a traditional trade show and event, do you think?
Well, it's quite interesting. We do a lot of work here on the ground. So we're in Hayward Heath in Sussex, and we do a lot of work with our local business association. And they were going to completely remove live events from their, it's a small networking events, right? So it's 100 local businesses, and they lost loads of members, because loads of members said, and actually they lost them during the pandemic as well, because they said the only valuable part of my association membership is meeting other business owners in a B2B way. And that was the value that they got out of that experience. So I think, again, it's down to the definition of what you think virtual is, but it's listening to your customer, and it's saying, okay, well, is virtual really a good way for them?
I think that's a really interesting point, and let's just pick that apart, because this report, it says here, was 200 B2B event organizers.
Yes.
If I'm honest, that's kind of a disappointing figure, considering how big LinkedIn is and how probably every event organizer is probably on that platform. And at the time that this report was being done, was probably engaged enough to give their thoughts and feelings, considering their industry had been pretty much decimated over the last 12 months, right? Like,
yes,
why did you get the report? Did you get a request of the report?
No, 200 is not. I don't know, Explorer would tell you, I'm sure, that 200 is not a good enough sample size.
It's not significant, is it, when we're talking about an entire global sector? I think, let's take Event Tech Live as an event for about 2,500-3,000 people. if I got an initial response rate as an event organizer on an NPS of 10, 20%, I'd be pretty happy. I think that's I could quantify the results based on that. But when we're talking about the amount of people on LinkedIn and the amount of us as an industry that are on there, I don't see any kind of associations referenced or any of their members or anything like that. It seems like a bit of a reach. So my question then on that is, are they the right people to ask? Should we be asking, like you just suggested, the customers of the event organisers on what their objectives are?
And I think that that's a really interesting question, because I think that, where does the event organisers are the wrong people to ask? You should be asking your customers. You should also be asking the CMOs, because when we talk about, I was talking to experiential agencies the other day, and they were saying that actually, a real life event is not just, it's a certain budget, right, in your whole marketing P&L. So you might have had an event budget, you might have had a digital budget. Where does virtual events sit in there? To assume that virtual event budgeting will come just purely from your existing event budget is just fundamentally incorrect, because it starts crossing over into digital. And I've suggested to some of my sort of event organisers who are selling commercially sponsorship for virtual events, when they go, oh no, sorry, we've got no event budget. Well, where's your digital budget? Yeah. What are you spending on your digital? That's the question you should be asking. So I don't think, and event organisers, we react to, as I said before, we react to what our audiences are asking. So what are our audiences spending their money on, and what do they want to get out of it? And I think that the budgets are going to be sliced so differently that it's not going to come from that one part. We'd be foolish to think that, £10 million are spent on marketing budget for X company, they're going to now spend 5% million on virtual, and the rest will be on events. It won't be. They'll be recarving that marketing budget completely differently.
I think that's a really interesting point, and that's a bit of a transition in the way that we're planning and designing events, and the terminology and the communication, the value that we're presenting to our customers, right? And then I guess also a change in thinking of as a company participating in an event, what is the value I'm getting at this, and what is it akin to that I do elsewhere in my marketing? And like you said, it's very, very close to marketing. I guess every event will have a different price point, right, to participate in their event. But I think in terms of a justification of like value, I think the quickest comparison that somebody can probably take is, well, if I took that budget and pumped it into LinkedIn marketing, Google marketing, Facebook marketing, or our own database marketing and stuff like that, what do I think I would spend there, and how many leads and how much push through to our website and stuff would I get? I think one of the things that actually those things don't do as well as potentially virtual events do is create those conversations, potentially. Some people have got very sophisticated marketing solutions and programs in place that do get people to pick up the phone or at least email inquire, and they do transition onto conversations. There's also the value of being associated with an event, right? And with a community and that visibility, and that's really hard to get online. I mean, people do go off and try and engage in forums and other kind of aspects of that to get that community, don't we? We see like Facebook is like just, I feel like Facebook is just groups now, and if your community and your niche, or your what you want to, whatever you want to talk about. I'm a member of a couple of pizza communities on Facebook. I don't mind admitting.
I know, because we're friends on Facebook, and I think it's
I will send you one. But yeah, I think it's a transition of where is that budget coming from and what pot does it sit on, and maybe the virtual event play will actually come more out of the digital marketing budget, and it'll be a combination of the marketing team deciding, and also maybe the sales and outreach team kind of also putting that forward. One of the things that you mentioned was that this was kind of contradictory to a recent Gartner report that came out. I know we were scrambling before this to kind of try and find that report. But can you remember specifically what it was about that report that you felt that had a difference of opinion to the one that LinkedIn's pushed out?
Yeah, so the Gartner report, and I will share it with you after this, it's called the Gartner playbook predictions. So Gartner obviously released lots of marketing guides, and I'm sure some of the others do, McKinsey and EY and stuff. And I really recommend these Gartner reports. They're really interesting. Mm-hmm. And they predicted from this, what they've surveyed from the CMO level, that really strategic CMO level, that by 2023, 63% of CMOs who pivoted to digital will be going back into some form of real experience, real life experience. And then the report's quite interesting because it says sort of 4 or 5 things that they need to now think about to do that. But it was, it sort of echoes something as well that Mary Portas, Queen of Shops, she's been talking about the death of the high street. And she's like, thank God the high street's dying, because the way you interact with shops nowadays is so dire. And it's the same, I think, with some of the live events. You know, they're just so, you think about your experience when you go into like a Next or, you know, Debenhams. Oh God, it's just not a reality. It's just not akin to how we think as people. So sometimes things need to die in order to reinvent that. And this report from Gartner basically says that the brands that have pivoted to serving digital are great, but by 2023, they need to go back into that real life experience so they can interact and engage with their customers on a more personal level. Because we think about the kindness economy and what we're talking about, sustainability, and how people are consuming things in their day-to-day lives and how that's changing. We need to now start applying that to a B2B world, because that is going to, the choices they make in their personal lives are spilling into their corporate lives. Yeah. And the young people coming through are quite happy to challenge. You know, if they're trying to be good with their carbon output, and they're good at not traveling, they're going to say to their boss, well, why do I need to fly to that country to go to that trade show when I can just have a couple of meetings online? That's going to start being pushed back. And I think we really need to justify that spend. So going back to the Gartner report, the CMOs are going to need to start creating a real life experience. They didn't necessarily say events, but they said a real life in-person experience to engage with their audiences. So I think that does contradict the fact that 45% of everything will be on virtual.
Yeah,
that's how I read it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one in the sense of, part of me does think there could be some truth to what LinkedIn is saying, in the sense that it will be an explosion of new events by people that don't necessarily see themselves as event organizers, and they're not necessarily doing it for the reasons a traditional event would do, which is about bringing people together for that human connection, for that networking, for that serendipity that happens at an event, around a bar. The networking bit's like, okay, you should meet Dave because you guys should really chat, and there's so much value in that. Like, I know we've got the Event Tech Lab barbecue coming up. There's no other objective about that event apart from bringing people together that probably haven't seen each other for such a long time. And to be fair, that's the only value that it needs. But when it comes to this, and I think it's an explosion of virtual events, it's more like everybody's now got the tool to be able to be an event organizer or to put on an event. The same way probably webinar technology went. Everybody probably started launching webinars when webinar technology came out, and it's kind of now the idea of hosting an event has become democratized. So if you've got anything from a few hundred quid probably to tens of thousands of dollars or pounds or whatever you want to call it, you can probably put on an event of scale that suits your needs. So I wonder whether this is driven by the fact that they're going to see an explosion of people all of a sudden. And we think it's probably been busy over the last year. I wonder if it's just going to be just a swath of virtual events. I don't know what you think to this as well, but do you think there's anything else underlying that is driving kind of LinkedIn's reasoning for putting a report out like this? And if you don't mind, before you answer that, I'm just going to pull up on screen for everybody part of the actual report, which is really interesting. Sorry if you can't see this, guys. I try to zoom in as much as possible. It's saying the majority of event organizers, 88%, arranged a virtual event, webinar, funnily enough, it mentions webinar, or online talk last year. I mean, we couldn't do anything else. We
No.
couldn't organise a physical event. So
the other 20% were lying down with a gin and tonic somewhere, going, "Oh my god, my whole career is down the toilet." That's what that, you know.
That's it. So that's the 12 the 20, is it 12 or 20? I can't, quick maths. The rest of that percentage, that's what they were doing. They were drinking gin. So I'm personally taking that with a pinch of salt. It's like, well, there was no alternative, so it's a bit of a weak stat, if I'm honest. Data from LinkedIn's own platform, this is where it gets interesting, shows that LinkedIn live streams increased over 400% year on year, and LinkedIn Live Broadcaster, I'm not sure the definition or the difference between those two, increased nearly 500%. In fact, in December, 12,000 events were hosted a week with a combined 500,000 attendees. Again, I doubt all of those actually turned up. They probably just registered for it on LinkedIn because they were like, there's nothing else to do. And by pivoting this way, 81% of organisers say virtual events provided opportunities that would not have been there otherwise. And that last sentence makes me feel that they're saying that they were the bit that actually made that happen in terms of their platform, was the savior of all of those organisers being able to organise a virtual event, which to me is not. LinkedIn has become, for virtual events, a marketing platform. You know, you can invite your connections, you can now ask people to register, so it's a data lead capture opportunity, and then you push them somewhere else. So do you think there's something underlying there? Because I get that sense of that feeling. But by all means, please do disagree with me. But it seems to me like they're saying virtual events are the biggest thing coming, because they're going to play they feel they're going to play an integral role in part of that ecosystem.
Well, it's quite interesting because when they first start that line, it says virtual events, webinars, or live streams, I think, were the three categories. And then at the end, they wrap it in. So they obviously feel like their version of LinkedIn broadcast is an event, whereas I would see it as a webinar, a live stream.
Yeah.
So they themselves are muddying the water, I think. And you know, maybe they'll look to launch into virtual event spaces, but you know, it comes down to that definition of what you think a virtual event is compared to you know, and LinkedIn are not the saviors of the events.
Sorry, anybody to LinkedIn watching this. Katie said it, so it shall be done.
It's me. It's not Adam.
I think there's some really interesting points in there. First and foremost, this is not an event. I would argue this is a live stream. This is a way for us to engage the community and allow people to engage and ask questions and things like that if they want to. So there is some engagement there, but there's no community network. There's no other elements of what I would class as the real core principles of an event to make an event really, really work.
Yeah.
So
and if I put my cynical hat on, hat on, you know, if anyone's watched Social Dilemma on Netflix, I know exactly where I'm coming from. You know, all of these platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, are prioritizing video content, right? So through stories and through reels now. And why is that? It's because it's addictive. You know, watching live, watching videos, watching reels are addictive, and their job is to keep you in their platform for as long as they possibly can. They are the Vegas, you know, of your virtual world. Yep. So if I put my cynical hat on for a moment, I can't help but think that because their algorithm on LinkedIn is, you know, they prioritize video, and they're just as much as the others. So if you're sitting on LinkedIn talking about Facebook, you're in the same world. Yeah. And they're prioritizing that for their own gain. They want to keep you addicted. They want to keep you in their platform. So so my cynicism there says that they're going to say that because they want you to stay in LinkedIn.
I have to agree. The whole well, for a start, I've heard on good authority that if you want to be approved for LinkedIn Live Broadcast, the more native video that you upload to LinkedIn at the moment increases your chances quite substantially of being accepted for LinkedIn Live. So anybody there, I'm trying my best to do that because I'm still not been approved. But you know, so that kind of feeds into that narrative of the more native video, the more that you are pushing on LinkedIn natively, and keeping people within the ecosystem, the more that they value as a member of the community in terms of accessing to their extra tools, on the basis that you're probably going to use that tool to do more of that within their ecosystem. And it is all about engagement, isn't it? It's about, increasing people's dopamine levels of like, oh yeah, I've just, somebody's liked, somebody's commented, somebody's shared. There's a great example of that of a post that Gleaning put out the other day, and it just blew up, didn't it, because of the amount of engagement that it was getting. And I guess video and live stream content kind of really plays even more into that of in the moment people commenting. And I would say there's also probably an underlying ad revenue kind of side to it. The more time people spend on LinkedIn, the more ads they're being served, the more revenue and ROI that they can show to their advertisers. So LinkedIn and Facebook, they're publishers, but they're self-published platforms, aren't they, in the sense that they rely on the content that we as the community create in order to drive engagement and content. They're not like a traditional magazine or newspaper where somebody writes it, publishes it, and then people read and comment on it. We actually do that. So that's got to mean more money for them in terms of more people, more dwell time, more revenue. I think that's an interesting point.
And maybe they're starting to look at some of the money that some of these big platforms are starting to get. We've seen some very publicized investment into the virtual event market, and maybe they're like, you know what, we can start selling that as an add-on. We can start, I'm subscribed to LinkedIn Learning, and I pay a subscription to about £27 a month. The amount of courses that I do on LinkedIn, it's a great tool, but the amount of tools that I actually have courses I've probably done, probably could have gone to a real life one. But, there'll probably be micro subscriptions. They'll probably start getting into that micro subscription world.
Absolutely. Everybody knows in the tech world, at least, that the higher your annual recurring revenue are, the higher the valuation of your business. And those small amounts, £27 on the face of it, it's not a huge amount, is it, for what we would probably deem as a huge amount of value. And this goes for every virtual event. I think the one of the benefits of virtual events will be the speed and cost effectiveness in which you can access information as an individual. But that does mean big money. And, LinkedIn are ultimately owned by Microsoft. We can see the way that Microsoft are going. They've just tried to acquire Discord. They've been told no to like 12 billion. So is a virtual event platform really that far out of the realms of being acquired? Could they just build it themselves? Maybe that's what Hopin's building for. They want to be, taken on by a LinkedIn or an Adobe. By the way, I don't know if that's absolutely true. If that's just me, hypothesizing.
If it happens, you're going to be done for trade secrets.
There is one thing, and it does come back to that revenue. LinkedIn, when it first started off, was a recruitment tool. That's how they drove that business, and recruitment has evolved and changed. And I'm sure still a huge amount of LinkedIn's revenue comes from that, but they are evolving as a business. And then I look to the way that Facebook have just recently gone, and LinkedIn must be close behind. As an event organizer, I'm now getting told that I can sell my tickets to my events through Facebook. So now they are becoming a ticketing agent. They're going to take a percentage and then an administrative charge or Stripe fee or whatever on that. And in the B2B world, that could be billions of dollars of revenue to them in just simply allowing people to register direct on LinkedIn and not have to use another registration system. And if that's for a virtual event, even better.
And I think in the B2B world, before with Facebook, there'll still be some people, myself included, that be a bit dubious about registering via Facebook because it's my personal. No one needs to see pictures of my cat. However, on LinkedIn, it is my professional platform and it's totally professional. So I would have no problem in buying a ticket via LinkedIn. Sorry for any registration companies out there.
Yeah, I know.
I've got no registration clients, so it's not like
we might be putting the fear of God up a few registration or other technology providers that kind of help organizers do that professionally, because I guess even Event Tech Live, we kind of invest some money into LinkedIn in order to get visibility of our audience acquisition play. I think that's everybody's strategy, right? Now, if I can get better visibility through LinkedIn because they want to sell as many tickets as possible to my event because they're going to make money out of that, and also maybe some of those registration questions or those awful things that you have to fill out on virtual event platforms all the time can be sucked out of your LinkedIn profile because it's the most up-to-date information about you in a B2B environment. That makes the process a lot more streamlined and simpler. Then there's also a lot of data and analytics that can be fed back to LinkedIn on kind of turnout rates and engagement that they could probably sell to somebody else as well on the back of it. So
yeah, I mean, how much money would you save if you didn't have to have a PPC campaign, if you didn't have to have, which then led to your event registration company, which then led to, how much money would you save? Just give it to LinkedIn. It'd be quite a lot, I imagine. They'll make it competitive.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you looked at it holistically as a combined, we have to pay a reg company, we pay a PPC company, we do this, we do that. LinkedIn's relatively expensive, I think, to market anything through. I think the average cost per click is something like $50 or something like that in actual spend. But if they're going to get some revenue back from your users, then maybe they can make that a bit more cost effective on the organizer side, but still make some revenue. So I think there is, underlying on this, what I'm reading out of it, and also everybody that's watching or listening to this back, there was a very nice line that as a part of the LinkedIn learning platform that Katie's just mentioned, and she's a member of, so there's a play for that as well. I think everybody that's listening and watching, I'm personally not saying that this report doesn't have some truth to it. I think LinkedIn are clever enough and wise enough, and they've got some really interesting people working for them, that it won't put something out that wasn't based on some fact. But it does ring to me that it's very pro virtual events on the basis that there's something else going off in the background at foot as a play within their business that has pushed them to put. Because I've also asked for the report and I've not seen it. Nobody's going it for me.
And also, it's we're doing a lot of this work, so you can see it. Organic SEO, they're just driving that. It's full of your keywords, search terms. It sort of writes itself. Some of the sentences, I'm like, that's not. It feels like it's been written by a bot rather than written by a human being. Sorry, the person who wrote it, but that's how when I read it, that's how I read it. It's like, oh, there's quite a lot of keywords in there.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I didn't think about that actually. Maybe it was written by one of the new GTP3 AI kind of. I thought I'd do something on virtual events. And went, all right, okay.
And really, they should backlink to that report, right?
That was the interesting thing. Like, as the editor of Event News, generally when anybody sends me any kind of content, this is from the teams at like Explory or associations and stuff like that. As the editor, you always get sight of that report in depth, in full, and generally, if you want, you can also ask to see some of the card hold data and results of it to kind of back that up, because we have a duty of care to make sure that what they're actually saying is factual. And I think LinkedIn have pushed this out, going, well, LinkedIn, people will just believe it without any proof or having to actually, because it's, apart from this release that got put out, there's no other kind of meat on the bones. There's no other evidence or anything like that. It doesn't go into any more detail. So it's very superficial, maybe is the right word to use. Yeah. What would you have done differently if you were writing this report, Katie, or you were pushing this out?
So I would have asked a much bigger sector, as you say, 200 people, especially when you've got access to thousands. I'd also look at it in a much more granular level. So what does that mean? How do people define B2B? I would give more data and more stats to make it more interesting and generate more conversation. So we've got so we're a digital first agency, which means that everything we do, every output that we have, thinks about things in a digital way. And that doesn't mean that we don't love live events, because we do, but we see digital as a really good way of attracting attention, attracting leads, building your online reputation. And so for me, I've got two things that I always ask myself whenever we're sending anything out, or whether we're creating reports for clients, or whenever we're talking to clients. Firstly, would people talk about it in the pub? So LinkedIn to tick, because they've got us talking about it. You've put it on Twitter, and I noticed that quite a few influential people actually said, hang on a second. So they've done that. The second thing is, does it go back to your website? Can it only be seen on your website? Can people only get that traffic from your website? So that's what any PR that we do. That's how we talk to our clients, and that's how we encourage them to think when they're putting out press releases and when they're trying to do their backlink strategy and organic SEO. So when I look at this piece, I'm like, has it got us talking? Yes, it has. Is it only available on their website with 0 other backlinks? Yes. And so for me, again, with my cynical hat, I don't think it's to come off, but with my cynical hat on, I'm like, it's just a bit of PR that they put out there.
It's not your cynical hat, it's your marketing and PR strategic hat that you are wearing that is telling you. I think you're right, there's always multiple reasons for people putting something out. And I think this is a play also into that, the thousands of hours of learning that is now available on LinkedIn. I've even seen a few event industry people kind of pop up with courses promoted for virtual event production or organizing virtual events and things like that. So there's obviously that as well.
Yeah,
really,
and I think that's great. By the way, I think that that new subsector of virtual event organisers and producers, that's so good. We're not just event organisers anymore; we're also virtual event organisers, and it's a really nice to have a new wave of people. And actually, they're more techy and tech based. They come out at things with a different interests, and talking to them is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think that has to be one thing to be said for virtual events or for being able to deliver things digitally. The access that then everybody has to that information, that content. The industries that I think are going to have the hardest times are the universities, the Yales, the Harvards. Like a huge amount of their revenue comes from having to have people on campus. And as Elon Musk said, you need to really go to a place like that. You can literally, every piece of information is on the tip of your fingers from a Google search now.
I would counteract that though with two things. Firstly, when I think of my university, my time at university, I do not think of the courses or lectures.
Can you remember it?
If I turned up, I might have missed one or two. Sorry, man. Okay. That's not what I think of when I think of a university experience. And secondly, and probably this is because I'm watching The Good Fight at the moment, but when those, if you're talking about Yale or you're talking about any of the Ivy League universities, when people go to them, they study things like law and medicine. If you're studying law, you need to be able to argue with people and you need to be able to have discussion, and all of that is only really done properly in person. You can do it online, but we went to see a client today because we're generating a verbal identity for their business, but we could have done that over Zoom. Luckily they're in a train ride away for 20 minutes, but sitting in front of them and having a coffee, we uncovered more in 45 minutes having a coffee and asking those questions. We all know there's questions that you can ask in person that you just can't ask online. Ask anybody who runs a team and who's having to do that virtually at the moment. They can't have those tricky conversations with people. It's really hard to have online.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, that's segued onto really my final question. And this is a new thing I'm starting as part of the Event Tech Talks, because I'm just interested.
Okay.
So this is a question that I would ask you across the table. But to finish off, what's on your bucket list for this year for you personally? One thing.
On my bucket list, what to experience?
Yeah, something that you're doing, looking to do. Just share that with us.
That's a really tricky question. I think, I'm getting married this year.
All wedding presents can be sent to the PO box.
Yeah, that QR code. I'll tell you to scan that.
That's the John Lewis wedding gift list, isn't it? Yeah.
I think my aim for this year is just to reconnect personally with everybody in my private life and our clients, and from a business perspective, also people that we want to meet up with. But in my private life, it's just to reconnect with people. I just want to have a drink in a pub, and it's probably not. I'm sure there's lots of people having much more interesting bucket lists, but for me, it's just those personal connections with people.
Yep, I went for my first pint yesterday, and
Oh.
it was glorious. I must admit. Katie, thank you very much for coming on to talk about this. I know it's a slightly different episode of Event Tech Talks than we usually talk to. We're usually really into, technology specifically. But I think, when somebody like LinkedIn puts something this out, it deserves a conversation. I'm sure many people have had conversations about this report offline as well. For anybody that's watching or live or watching this on replay, if they want to connect up with you, where's the best place to go?
Well, we're about to launch our new website, which isn't that exciting news for everybody else, but it is exciting for us. So
I expect a press release about it.
Yeah. So you can either just LinkedIn connect with me, or you can go to 5283.com and visit our website, and there's sign up there to a newsletter, and you can meet all of our team and see what we do as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on today.
No worries.
Guys, if you enjoyed today's podcast or live session, please do share it with your network. Go and check out the previous episodes on eventtechlive.com under the podcast section. Invite your friends to the next one. We have some really exciting episodes coming up around virtual fundraising, using AI and to produce clips of your event and push engagement to your audience through an on-demand solution. So do subscribe, do follow us, and we'll see you in the next one.